Hey guys, welcome to a special episode of the Acquirable Podcast. I'm excited, I'm surprised, I'm relieved to say that this month marks a year since I started Stone Canyon Advisors, which of course is the company that produces this podcast. So I wanted to just take a little bit of time to talk about what the last year's been like for me personally, and just if you will, just kind of take that journey with me and live that first year with me. It was filled with a lot of twists and turns, a lot of amazing things that happened, and a lot of very difficult things that happened. And I think one of the real important things for me that I learned was just the value of being communicative with people that I'm working with and people in the marketplace, to open up the door to me and what the experiences are like, and to be vulnerable with people. And so I appreciate you tuning in. I'm going to walk through 6 words that I feel define a part of the year and tell you what they mean. So I've got a stack of cue cards right here. These are cue cards, as always, anytime I use an agenda or cue cards. This is to remind me what I want to talk about, but it'll also help you understand kind of where my head's at. So let's check out this first one here. Enthusiasm, man. So I'm gonna frisbee that off to the side. When you start a company, I was never told this. Nobody ever told me that this is the case. But when you start a company, there is a madhouse of excited people that come around you and start to cheer for you. And if you've never started a company before, you really don't know that. And I think even if you were told that and you've never started a company before, how could you know what that even means or what that would feel like? But I'll tell you, for me, what it felt like. If you go, day 0 being the day that you launch, day -1, so the day before you launch, you are afraid. You're not sure if it's going to work out. There's probably some people that are close to you that are for it, and there's going to be some people around you that are against it. And you really are taking a risk. You're making a bet that it's going to go positively, but you don't know that it is going to go well. So day -1 is filled with anxiety. You don't know how people are going to react. You don't know what the market's going to say. You rely on referral partners and vendors and suppliers and counterparties in whatever business you're in, and you just have no idea how they're going to react. What I found was, when you start to tell people about the fact that you started a company, there's overwhelming positive reaction, and that surprised me. I did not expect that. I anticipated questions. I anticipated well wishes. I did not expect enthusiasm. So those, you go from day 0 to day 1 to day 2, and I really noticed it for the first 2 months. There's just this overwhelming excitement that comes from the marketplace. I think that's human. That's just the human nature, that we love people who try things. We love people that take risks. We love people that do things that we know to be hard. Everyone admires the man in the arena, right? That poem about the man in the arena. Everybody admires that man in the arena. And when you start a company, you step into that persona of the man in the arena, and everybody's watching. They're cheering. They may not envy what you're doing. There's people that would not put themselves in that position of taking the risk and starting the company. Even if that's their mindset, they still are watching what you're doing, and they love it. They're rooting for you. So there's just an excitement, an enthusiasm that exists in those early days. There's really 2 things that I learned from that, and I've tucked away in just life lessons and experiences that I'll never forget, and I'll always tell people now. You need to recognize that enthusiasm's there, and you need to figure out how to capitalize on it, because the truth is, you just started a company, right? And you need to pull everything together. You've got to get vendors, you've got to get employees, you've got to get maybe some office space, you need to get clients, most importantly. So when you notice that enthusiasm, recognize that it's real, recognize that there is something you can do to turn that into business. And you don't want to miss that moment. So there is a moment when you start that it's like a zeitgeist that you'll never forget, that early season of when you started a company. And you can use that to attract people to come work for you or to work with you. You can use that to get your first client signed up. You can use that to get vendors to come and have a trust-based relationship with you that maybe they wouldn't have had with maybe a smaller company otherwise. There's a lot of enthusiasm. I think it's necessary. Like I think it's the universe's way of making sure that new endeavors can exist and start, is that the humans that are surrounding that in the community is excited. So don't take that for granted. Like when you find yourself in that situation, recognize the enthusiasm exists because there needs to be a spark to help that company get off the ground, and you should be recruiting. I think the risk is you feel unprepared to capitalize on the enthusiasm. You're like, hey, we're just going to lay low. We're going to see if we can get things off the ground, and then once we get off the ground, then we'll start to pull the other things into place that we need. We'll go get vendors, we'll go get some office space, some employees. Like we'll do that as if and when things kind of work out. But you really lose the enthusiasm, you lose the natural momentum that comes from it. So like the lesson learned for me in that season and in that feeling is just, man, recognize that it's there, recognize that that's like nature's way of getting companies off the ground is the human enthusiasm for new endeavors and the people that are starting them, and capitalize on it to get your first clients, to get your first employees, to get your vendors lined up. Lean into it. So I'm going to go on to the next thought here. So, man, this was a tough one for me. The word ego. Now, the word, I think really what's at the core of the word ego here is identity, but I needed these all to start with the letter E. So, frisbee that off to the side. So what I learned about myself through the process of starting a company, I think is more growth, and it forced more growth than any other single event in a short amount of time. There's other major growth periods that I've experienced in my life. Like when I first met my wife, for example, you grow a lot. When I had my first child, you grow a lot. When I, like every stage in your life, you're presented with these like hurdle time periods where you're going to the next level. You're on one level and then you're going to the next level. So you're presented with all these times in life where that's happening. This was the most condensed for the amount of growth that I went through ever, and it shook and it tested my identity, and I think it shows up in the form of ego. So let's think about this. So go back to day -1. So the day before you start the company, Josh Donnelly, identity professionally, investment banker, great M&A practitioner, also had an understanding that like I'm uniquely gifted at stewarding and managing like capital decisions. So like big capital decisions for companies, I'm good at that. That's like a professional identity, right? When you start a company, you're now a startup CEO. I've never ever thought about being a startup CEO. It's never been on my wish list. I've never desired to do that. But you find yourself in that role, right? All of a sudden, and you find yourself still having to be the kind of professional and the investment banker and the person who is good at capital decisions, but you're also a startup CEO, and that's a whole separate thing to be able to do and to be good at. So I really wrestled with that. I've got to be honest. Like that was a very difficult thing for me to make decisions in the early days wisely around, because I didn't even know that about myself. I didn't know how to be a startup CEO. It manifests itself in a couple of different ways, and I'll talk more about some of these later, but it shows up in the form of like discomfort. It shows up in the form of, for me, that looks like grouchiness. Like I pissed. Like I start to get like reactive, and I get like angry with people that are close to me when I feel really uncomfortable. So I noticed that in the first couple of months, and you could chalk it up to stress, but really like I encourage you to lean in and dig a layer deeper. Like, is it just stress, or are you wrestling with something important that's at the identity level? And as we've hosted this Acquirable Podcast over the last year, it's funny, and I feel in good company because all the CEOs that we talk to, the conversation always goes to identity. Like at some point, if we spend 30 or 40 minutes with them, it's going to end up at identity at some point there, because that is a thing that seems to manifest itself for people when they're running a company, when they're surrounding themselves with talented people, and especially when you've started a company, because nothing's easy. Nothing's easy when you start a company. So for me, and I'll talk more about this later, but it started to show up in the form of like panic attacks. Like within the first 2 to 3 months, I had the first panic attack that I've ever had in my life. Didn't really know what was happening, but luckily, like I've surrounded myself with good people who've been through this and who knew what was going on and knew how to diagnose that for me and help me through it. It shows up, and again, these are lighter forms, but I've already mentioned, like I get grouchy when it's hard to control things. Really, it comes down to like the fact that you don't have a lot of control when you start a company, and you are sort of truthfully for the first few months in a vulnerable state. And so there was a period of time, I would say, like as day one became day seven, as day seven became month one, and as month one became month two, somewhere in that like 2 to 4 month range, I really went through like some identity work that I had to do, and to sort out like, who am I? Why am I doing this? I never really planned to do this. I never thought to start a company. I never had a desire to start a company. And so I had to go through just some deep identity work around why am I doing it? And then what does Josh Donnelly look like as this new person in this new role that I feel like I've been called to be in? That kind of brings us to the next word, which is emergence. So I spent a lot of time on this, and I would encourage you to, if you find yourself in the same situation, having some of the same symptoms that I just described, where you're like wrestling with like the role that you find yourself in, and it not really aligning with what you've always thought you were, you should really lean into that and dig deep. That's like a root thing inside you that you need to understand, because ultimately, let's just talk about the business reason for doing that. The business reason to understand what's happening and why you're feeling the way you feel right now is because it's going to ultimately be your shortcoming or your downfall if you don't address it from the start. So you think about somebody that you know who's owned the same company for 40 years or 50 years, and they're having trouble growing it, or they're having trouble finding successors or something like that. It's my belief, but also kind of my understanding now, having been through the first steps of that occurs because they didn't address the identity and ego issues up front. So what I would suggest you do, and what I really did, was like dig deep into the identity, your identity, and recognize that's what's causing like these feelings. It's not just a business thing, it's a personal thing that's happening to you, and emerge from that with a new identity and a new purpose centered around your why. And I always think there's big questions, right? Like why, who, what, where, when. Those are the biggest framework type questions to ask yourself kind of in life. I think why comes first. Why always comes first. It precedes the like who, what, when, and where. And I think the reason for that is because it's an identity-based question. So if you don't understand like why you're doing this, or why you've started a company, and also if you don't understand why your previous identity, like for me, like as an investment banker, M&A professional, like that I've really dug into and held on to for so many years, if you don't really understand why you held on to that, dig into that and emerge with a new identity centered around the why. So like for me, my why has always been a couplefold. Like at the most basic level, I feel that I serve a God and that He calls us to do things, and those things may be in the eyes of the world big or little, but it's the fact that you were called to do it that makes it the thing that you have to do. So that why existed for me throughout all seasons, but I hadn't come up with kind of a new understanding of my current role and why I was called to do that, because it was not a thing I ever anticipated. After that, I do feel like, I've been given talents where I'm great in a context of M&A and great in the context of allocating capital, but it's not those functions that really define my identity. Rather, it's the demeanor that makes you good in that situation that you take hold of and say, okay, I've learned something. It's not just that functional area that I'm good at that I'm going to base my identity on, but rather I'm good at this certain demeanor, and that demeanor can be applied elsewhere. I had a great mentor in college who showed me my first M&A deals ever, and I remember very clearly him saying to me, like, as you graduate from college and you go out into the business world, and he knew that I was going to go into investment banking and M&A because that's what he trained me to do, and he knew what I was going on to do. Or at that time, I was going to work for Stifel Nicolaus and Company. He said, like, don't think about what you're learning at that moment. Rather, think about like what you're learning and how else it can be applied. So don't be so insular that you're just like, what's the track I'm on and how far will it go? But rather, like, what are the skills that I'm learning and where can they be applied elsewhere? And I think that was the first step in this lesson. The second step was when it came to this season of starting the company, where it was like, not just what are the skills I've learned and how can they be applied, but like, what is the demeanor that I have and like, who am I as a person and how else can that be applied to the world? And so you just think more broadly. And again, I can't stress enough like how important the emergence of like continual emergence of new identity is for being in business, being a leader. But you really get forced into it when you start a company, because like I said, that was just like such a condensed period of learning for me in a way that I'd never experienced before. Sticking with me here? So here's the next thing, and this speaks to kind of the emergence and my understanding now of like what it is that we're doing here and what is it that I'm doing here. And I define it with the word enterprise. I'm a capitalist, so I like these big boring words like enterprise. It's a good friend of mine, Brad Lee, who we've had on the Acquirable Podcast. He talks about it, I think, in that podcast too. He talks about the enterprise mindset and he defines it, and it really spoke to me. I really understood it. An enterprise mindset is a person who is not just thinking about like their task and their functional area, but rather looking around broadly at the people they're serving, the things that they touch in their functional area, and the big reason why we're all here kind of as an organization. So I think when he told me that story, he was speaking about like identifying teammates that had an enterprise mindset. And for him, it was really a person who, yes, they have a functional area that they own and they live in, but they're constantly looking at the customer universe and the vendor universe and cross-functional things. They're thinking about HR, they're thinking about finance, they're thinking about sales, marketing when they make any decision. And they're kind of pulling it all together, the whole system and the whole community, the whole ecosystem. They're thinking about it all. And that really spoke to me, and I'd say a big part of like this emergent identity that I stepped into really, as month 1 turned to month 2, turned to month 3 and 4, and as we get to somewhere around like month 6, I'm like, okay, I understand that's what we're doing here. We're building an enterprise. What's the reason for the enterprise? For us, we serve a very specific constituency, and that's founders and CEOs who are thinking about an exit. That's always been who we've served. We've always served them in one way, which was to represent them through the sale transaction. That's a relatively short period of time for that group of people. So what are the other things we can do to serve them better before or after that kind of 1 year time frame, the year that they sell, right? That's when we've always had this big impact, big relationship. It shows itself by the fact that oftentimes we didn't really know them for long before that. Then oftentimes we don't get to talk to them much after that because there's not a lot to think about or work on. But you have this really intense 1 year, kind of roughly 1 year relationship with that CEO or that founder or that owner as they go through the sale transaction. So then the enterprise mindset that we've grown into at Stone and I've grown into as a person is like, okay, we're here to serve that customer. We're going to continue to serve that customer in the way we always have, but we're going to do things to serve them also now before. So instead of just the 1 year during, we're also going to serve them for the 12 to 36 months before. So that's an enterprise mindset, is thinking about the customer and what else we can do to serve them. And that's where we came up with the Growth Advisors business, that it grew out of that plan. We were, we were just like blessed, lucky, fortunate, smart to go find people who had a career plan and a desire to also serve that same customer group and the skill set to serve them in that specific way. So you serve an entrepreneur, an owner, a CEO, you serve them very differently when they're thinking ahead to an exit and they want to know what to do to prepare and to be ready for that exit. You serve them very differently. And it's not a thing that investment bankers really could do or should do because, right, we're like, if I put my investment banker hat on, like we're great at getting the sale transaction done. That's a different skill set than the operational kind of chops and the leadership chops that it takes to affect change for a period of time before they're ready to sell. So emerging identity for Stone and then for me is that what is that customer that we've always served and how can we serve them better? How can we serve them for longer? So that unlocks like a whole like a wave of creativity. Right now we've leaned heavily into what can we do to serve them before the transaction with Growth Advisors first. We have a course that should be launched by the time this airs. And that course is intended to serve people who are 5+ years out from a sale transaction. So it's just self-led, low cost. What does it even mean to exit? So if I'm building a company and I want to exit someday, what does that even mean? And what are the things that I can start putting into place foundationally right now so that when I get there, in the next, kind of 3 to 5 years or something like that, where I'm actually on the doorstep now and thinking about doing something to affect an exit, I know what it means. I know the nomenclature. I'm educated on it. It's not so scary. It's not so opaque. So we've really thought a lot about how we serve that customer before the exit. We're also thinking a lot right now as an enterprise mindset. What can we do to serve those customers and those clients after the exit? So it again just unlocks creativity when you do that deep work about like why you're doing this, who are you, what's the real skill sets or demeanor or something that you have that you can bring to the market and how can you apply it? You start to think much broadly versus in that specific area. And we call that an enterprise mindset. Hat tip to Bradley for giving me that nomenclature. So I told you, I promised I would, get more into this and talk about this. But man, endurance is so important when you're starting a company because it's a grind. It's really a grind for a few different reasons. Like, yes, the hours can be long because there's so many things you have to set up and solve for and put together. There's a lot of things you don't know or maybe you haven't done before. especially if you haven't started a company, there's a lot of like administrative things that you have to put into place. And you just need to have like endurance to both put in the time to figure it out and to get it into place, but also to the endurance to like seek out the right help, because it's not always obvious who's the right people to come around you to help you build something. You might not even know the questions to ask. You might not know what like how to refer to the functional area of what you're looking for. And so you just need to have some endurance. Like other words for this that are commonly used are like grit. Like people that have grit are, I think it was Angela Duckworth, like she wrote a book about grit and just grit as a predictor of success. And I think she defined grit by just like a willingness to stick to something, even when it's hard, even if you fail, to just get back in the game. The amount of grit that's needed is super high. You know, I took some levels of the CFA exam when I was in college, and I remember this statistic that the key predictor of someone passing all 3 levels of the CFA exam, which is like notoriously in our industry, it's like hard. There's a very low pass rate, and the key predictor was just like number of attempts, right? So it wasn't like number of hours studied. It wasn't like age or education. It was just number of attempts. So, I mean, it's like shots on goal, right? Like you are, to be successful, like you are just going to have to stick with something even when it doesn't work out, even when there is difficulty and failure. And for me, I would say like the endurance season of this really came like as month 6 turned to month 7. That is like when I had my first panic attack. By the way, I don't have panic attacks anymore, thankfully, because I learned how to lean on my team and other people to not feel that I have to control every aspect of everything. On the tail end of no longer having panic attacks, I developed bronchitis, and it took so long to figure out what was going on, but I was just like constantly sick, and I just thought, man, I'm getting sick so much, like where'd my health go? And it was annoying because you'd be healthy for a day and then you'd be sick for 2, and then you'd be healthy again for 2 days and sick for 2. And that's infuriating. And I'm a pretty healthy person. I've never spent a long time feeling that bad or being very sick. And bronchitis, I guess, like maybe somebody smarter than me would have figured this out quicker, but like bronchitis for me was not obvious. Like it took a very long time, took a lot of questions to get to the root of what was actually going on so that you can fix it. You know, shout out to ChatGPT for helping me with symptom tracking. That was really the beginning of it, was where I just said, like, this isn't normal to be sick so much. It's affecting my quality of life. It's affecting the amount of time I can really focus on work. And I need to figure this out. And so just walking ChatGPT through the patterns of when things started, what were the life changes that happened, you know, and I had some guesses. At what might be going on. I was totally wrong. I was not at all right. Like I thought maybe I'm allergic to my dog. Maybe it's the stress from starting a new company. And the reality is just like, it was just bronchitis that was, you know, triggered by whatever. And as the doctor put it, like, hey, if you could just keep yourself from having symptoms with like medication for a month, then you'll be fine. You'll be back out of the weeds. Well, that was like a huge relief for me, right? But it just took endurance and sticking to it through all the things and all the stress and all the business. And then particularly for me during the first year, like a 3-month window where I was just not in good health, to really get through that. The takeaway for me and the lesson learned during that season was endurance, but specifically like team endurance. So going from where it's like every day, hey Josh, we need to wake up, we need to be motivated because we got a list of things we need to get done and tackle. And if you don't do it, then it's not going to happen. And learning to lean on a team to do things that they are great at and that they are accountable to do in the business, and to find endurance through that, and that is a big I feel lucky to have had like a stint of health issues that were just long enough that I had to really learn a lesson on how to manage through it, but not long enough that it was like debilitating really to me. right? But I got this like glimpse at what it would be like to, like have a company that 20 years from now, like God forbid, like I have to go through maybe like a cancer treatment or something like that, right? Like that happens to CEOs, that happens to leaders, and that takes businesses down when it happens if they haven't learned the lesson to lean on the team, which is really the precursor to like building an enterprise and a succession plan and having a fully built out kind of functional team that can work whether or not you're there. I feel lucky to have learned that in a low stakes environment early in the first year. And even though it sucked, I don't think I would trade it, because that I feel transformed the business from being a thing that was before that, like, hey, this is me waking up every day going, how do I move the rock forward, to me waking up every day going, I've got a team that's moving a lot of little rocks forward all together. And as a team, moving all those rocks is actually going to move like a rock pile or a mountain, right? That is, and I think learning to have endurance through a team structure is a great lesson to learn when you're starting a company. So I'll bring it home here with the last E word. You guys like that I focus on E words here, and that's excellence. And I think for me, this is the word that gets me the most exciting. I get the most excited with the word excellence. Like I have a core common desire that I've always had as a person, to be around the smartest people that I can find. So like smart people, ambitious people, those types of people have always gotten me excited. I've been so lucky in my life to like have friends at every level that were, even from childhood, that were smart and ambitious. Some of those people I'm still very close with to this day. To find family that's smart and ambitious, to find a wife that's smart and ambitious, to have in-laws that are smart and ambitious. Like I've done everything I could to really subconsciously even like to surround myself with smart and ambitious people, because they just get me excited. And so when I think about now, like what is the way the first year ends? The first year ends with a focus on excellence and thinking about my role as the managing partner for Stone Canyon. My role is to accumulate excellence and to create an environment where those people that exhibit the excellence thrive, and an environment where the people who do not exhibit the excellence, they do not thrive. And there is a way to identify that and to excuse them from the team. But the hardest thing to do, and the thing that I would say we end the first year laser focused on, is like, how do we become the hub that accumulates people that exhibit excellence? And I've had some great examples and mentors of this. Like, for example, I'd say our division president, when I was right out of college and I was a little baby investment banker, the division president really like made that his role, and I've continued to talk to him now to this day. But he kind of had a model for scale that was him being a beacon to the marketplace for people that were the most talented to come in and to be able to flex their talents and to be able to like increase their talents and to not be capped at all in how they could continue to further develop their industry talents. That is, and it's funny, like you ask, why wouldn't everybody do that? It's hard to do because of all the work that precedes that, related to your identity and your ego and the endurance that it takes to get to a place where you can attract what I call world-class talent, so people that really exhibit excellence. It's very hard to get there. And if you haven't done the identity and the ego work, you'll be threatened by those people. But if you have, you'll be excited by those people. And so I think, for anyone listening, just if you find yourself in a position where you're like trying to grow a team, you're trying to start a company, you're trying to build a career, ultimately just recognize like your success is going to be dependent on the quality of the team. Because if it's only dependent on you, that's a solo practice. That's like a company that's an extension of you. which doesn't really ever become much more than whatever you can kind of handle. And you might be able to get far with like a good group of helpers and support staff and things like that, and maybe even some people that are good at execution or good at things that you are less good at in your business. But it's very capped at your level of potential. If you can get yourself to a point where you're very excited to have teammates that tell you the best way to do things, teammates that are better than you at different things, and teammates that are excited to stick around and feel that you provide an environment where they can build their careers, right? And they can do it. There's alignment of interest. They want a place where they can flex their talents and show their world-class abilities, and to do it freely, and to have a company that like values and listens to that. If you can get there, the company's no longer an organization that's capped by your unique abilities or your capacity or the amount of time you have in a day or the amount of attention that you can give to something. It's uncapped because you've got all these people around you that are doing the same thing you're doing and wanting the same things that you're doing, and they're better at it than you could ever be. And so that's, as we kind of like wrap up that first year, that's where I find myself being very excited. That's where I find myself very focused, is like identifying who the world-class talent is, thinking about what needs to be true for them to want to be part of our team, and then thinking about what needs to be done for them to come to our team. And I'm, again, just so excited about that. And I think that it's something that's going to take us very far. And I think it's something that's going to give me personally a lot of energy. So I just want to end, I think where I began, which is just with gratitude. This first year, like I've kind of recounted with you, hard, rewarding, fun, some days not so fun. But overall, like just an extremely positive life experience for me, and I couldn't have made it through it without the teammates we have here at Stone Canyon. Couldn't have made it without the community support. So like our referral sources, our clients, the M&A community broadly. Couldn't have made it without the M&A community. My family in particular, like my wife. Like if you don't have alignment at home, you're never going to be able to build what you want to build outside the home. So I just want to end this kind of first year with that statement of gratitude, to just say thank you to everybody who kind of like believed in us and bet on us in all the forms that you all did. And I just want to say, like, I'm in this for the long haul, and we are going to build a big company here, and it's going to be exciting, and we're looking forward to just keeping you guys updated on this. And if you're listening to the end, I want to say I appreciate that you listened through the end with me, and I love being able to communicate just kind of openly with the market and tell you guys where my head's at, and look forward to doing it more. Thank you.